Hello, today I'm going to give my thoughts on the Gnostic Prison in relation to the Black Mirror episode U.S.S. Callister. One of my viewers at E1536 asked me what I thought of this episode, and I think they asked me because of my top 10 Gnostic film list. So it is the first episode of the fourth season, and I should say this at the beginning that I've seen probably 4 or 5 Black Mirror episodes, and the ones I saw I thought were kind of so-so. You know, I'm a huge fan of The Twilight Zone. I should like that show more than I do, but the ones that I kind of saw I just thought were not that great. But I will say I did enjoy this one. I thought it was very interesting, and it definitely aligns with where my head has been in the last couple years. So in U.S.S. Callister, a reclusive genius designs a virtual universe where he assumes a godlike role as a ruthless commander, grappling with themes of divine authority, existential identity, and the ethical implications of manipulating digital creations. Before I get deeply into it, I should say that there will be major spoilers for this episode. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to watch it and then come back to the video. I'm not going to talk about all of the, minutia of the plot. This is not a review. This is just my thoughts about how they kind of set this up. I'm going to focus mostly on the Gnostic aspects of it in relation to the Gnostic Prison. In the Gnostic Worldview, I'm just going to do a quick summation. If you want to check out, I have several other videos on Gnosticism on this channel. But basically there's the monad, which is like the universal mind. It's like the first kind of, I don't even want to call it God, I would call it all. From the monad there are emanations, and one of the notable ones is Sophia, which is a feminine emanation, and the word means wisdom. Well, Sophia decides that she's going to create something herself, and she kind of has an offspring called Yaldabaoth, which is also called the Demiurge. This being thinks that it's the true God. It thinks that it is the ultimate God, but it isn't. It's diluted because there is something higher than it. In its vanity, it fashions the material world so it can be worshipped, basically. Because the Demiurge is flawed, it creates a flawed reality. And what that means basically is that we're not in perfection. We have suffering. We live and we die. We're not in a constant state. And through this suffering, the Demiurge gets power from us. I'm not going to go deeply into it. You can check out my other videos if you want to know more about it. But in the case of this TV show, there's a computer programmer. He is the designer of this game. He has like a partner who is kind of the face of the company, and he's sort of the backroom guy. At this company, the people all kind of think he's weird, and he is kind of weird. But in the real world, our world, he just doesn't really function well. But he does function well in the coding world. Basically what happens is he creates this technology where he can clone people digitally from their, like a sucker, a lollipop, or a coffee cup, rim. He gets their DNA and he's able to kind of clone them. But not an actual clone, a digital clone. When he does that, the co-workers, he kind of chooses different ones, but they all kind of did something to him. So it's a bit of like a revenge fantasy kind of thing. They are trapped inside his world, and he is like the Demiurge. He can change anything anytime he wants. He has ultimate power over everyone. He can change their form. He can take away their mouth if he wants to. He can do anything. So these characters are stuck in this prison of suffering where every day he comes home from work and he kind of plugs into the game. And, at work, nobody really respects him, but in the game, everyone has to respect him or there will be consequences. Thinking about that in terms of the real world, our world, not in the television, you could say that the Demiurge is a lot like this character. Maybe there's a bit of pettiness You know, you see this a lot in like the biblical texts, like the flood, like these different things where there are consequences and they're very harsh. And I think in this story that is illustrated very well. All of the people want to get out of this false reality. They know deep down inside that they don't belong there. So occasionally they do, you know, this or that, and he will eliminate them, or they'll get shot, or something will happen, and he can kind of reincarnate them and bring them back because he has that DNA, and he can just rescan it, and then they come back. So it is a lot like the Gnostic worldview. They say that if you don't transcend this world, the illusion of this world, if you don't go into an ultimate state of purity, you will be reincarnated and come back and have to do it again. The only way to be free of it is to kind of see through the illusion and become one again with the monad. Obviously, that's very difficult to do. In the game, the characters struggle over and over again to try to outsmart him or, you know, do all these different things. Eventually, he brings in this other character who is another programmer, and he kind of has a crush on her. When he brings her in, you kind of see the process of where all the other characters have been broken too. So you kind of see her going through the breaking process where he's like trying to show her that he's the one in charge. It's interesting because you have two kind of stories going on. You have the story inside the game, then you also have the real world story outside the game. They kind of overlap because eventually the programmer realizes that she can communicate through code with her real world self, which when I saw that, it kind of blew my mind, because I think when you are in a spiritual state, like through meditation or through some kind of trance or something, you can often like kind of connect with that other part of yourself. That's the higher part. And so I can really see in the show how relatable that is to our actual world. It makes me kind of wonder if there is a way out in that case. The thing to remember about Gnosticism is that there are these emanations, and I almost would say they're kind of like levels of vibration is how I kind of see them. And so the higher the vibration, the closer you are to the monad. The lower the vibration, the further away you are. And the lower it vibrates, the more in physical material reality you are. So in the game, it seems kind of similar to that, but they kind of talk about the code more. In that way, I'd say it's a little bit like the Matrix. If you can purify your vibration, they also kind of do this in the show, where they're kind of trying to trick him by appealing to his ego and doing kind of a double cross. If you have ever heard of the Cathars, they were a sect in France, and they had a purification rite called the consolamentum. And what it was is they would do it before they were going to die. They would start working up to that, like eliminating certain things, trying to become as spiritually pure as possible. So when they died, they could transcend this illusion and go into the monad. Well, in this show, it's a very similar thing, because they kind of like illustrate it as this small, almost eye of the needle that they have to go through to get out of his control. And she, the programmer, creates this kind of escape plan. I think that in the real world, to also escape, you kind of have to think of a plan. I don't think it's just something that you can just do. I think that it takes a lot of work, and I think it takes dedication and just perception, because the more perception you have, the harder it is to be fooled by the delusion. I think in a lot of the texts, they kind of talk about it. You know, Jesus talked about the straight and narrow path, right? I think it's the same thing. Now, Jesus is represented in two different ways. If you know anything about Gnosticism, he's more like the Christos, I think they say, or Christos. He is more of a deliverer of information, He's not really there to save you from your sins. He's more to wake you up, let's say. Now, the idea of nirvana, samsara, all of these things is like the eye of the needle, like trying to get through and be free. In the story, they all don't believe her. They're all in complete nihilism because the programmer has broken them. And by being in nihilism, their vibration is very low. Whereas she's fresh and new, and she has knowledge of the Matrix, she's able to kind of inspire them, like the Christos, to try one last time to break free. She's the only way to beat it because she actually has knowledge of the Matrix. So you could say the Gnostics throughout history were kind of like the programmers. They had knowledge of the program, and that might be why they were persecuted so much, and many of their books were destroyed, and there were all the these inquisitions and stuff. So like, thankfully they found the Nag Hammadi library, so we do have some idea of what they were saying and how different it is from the Christianity we know. It's interesting because there are we did know stuff about them. There were different philosophers that wrote about them, but by having those books, it changed everything. And the more that I go through the texts, the more I realize, I would almost say that I would guess that those books are the original texts, and that the ones that we know now have been altered so much that they don't, the symbols are similar, but the meanings are completely different. Anyway, they escape the Matrix, and he's kind of defeated. If anything, I thought the ending was maybe the weakest part. Not that I don't like happy endings, but I just felt like the rest of the episode was a bit more clever. I thought overall it was a solid episode. If you have any thoughts about it, you can comment in the comments. I will mention a few other TV episodes or TV series that if you're into this Gnostic idea, you might benefit from them. One is in the first season of Star Trek. There's an episode called The Return of the Archons. It's episode 21. The entire series of Lost, if you think about it, is very Gnostic. Specifically, the first season of Westworld and the movie, I think, are both pretty Gnostic. Twin Peaks, very Gnostic. And also True Detective, I think, is quite Gnostic. So I think maybe at some point, I don't know when, I have a lot of other things on my plate at the moment, but I might do a top 10 Gnostic TV episodes at some point. I don't know. I'm toying with that idea. If you would like to see that, maybe you can just tell me in the comments. Other than that, that's about all I got. But yeah, I think it was an interesting episode, and thank you at E1536 for asking about it. Have a good day. Take care.